All right, so we got the cue from the software to let us know that the recording has commenced. And so let's begin. People can join us as they can, so as they become available to join the conversation. So today the webinar is being co-hosted by myself, Ernande Altima, and we have the great Dr. Eve Hudson that is co-hosting with me. And so I'm very ecstatic that she's taking time out of her busy schedule to participate and really help lead this webinar.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to it.
Yes. As you already know, we've been promoting the title as College Near or Far. We both have backgrounds in attending a university or college at home as well as out of state. And so we'll get deeper into those details later. But for right now, let's just begin and continue to introduce the topic. And so as you can see, the slide says college near or far, the pros and cons of attending college in or out of state. Prior to joining the call or beginning the webinar, I just thought to myself, 2-year college, but the college is just a general term. It could have been a 2-year college that people are thinking about or a 4-year college that people are thinking about. But this conversation that we're going to have is going to be mostly about 4-year colleges and universities, so the pros of cons of attending a 4-year college in-state or out-of-state. What are your thoughts about that, Dr. Eve? How general do you see the term college to be?
Oh, college is really general because a lot of times when you say college, people think first a 4-year institution. That's the first thing that comes to mind. It's what we promote. But like you said, it's definitely the 4-year. It's the university. It's a 2-year vocational, technical, proprietary. It's many things. But this does enable us to talk about several aspects of college life, but again, focus on that, I think, high school to 4-year, 2-year transition. So what do you do after high school? This is a really good, I think, segue to that.
Exactly. So let's continue on with the next slide, which is hello and welcome. At this very moment, we've just introduced who we are and how we're going to really focus this conversation a little bit more. But I kind of want to also give you the background of how Dr. Eve and I, began thinking that this would be a webinar we will jointly do together. So the story for that is, I stalked her on Instagram, and then I followed her, and I saw all the wonderful things that she was posting about just college and just the benefits of college and just the thoughts about what one should do before entering college. And as she just stated, high school finishes, and then the next phase in life is college. And, people just think it's a great thing, as it is, of, going into college, but there's lots of things that goes into the thought of pursuing an undergraduate degree, as well as a graduate degree or any professional degree. But, we all start first with a college degree before we can advance. And so with finding different things on her Instagram as well as her Twitter, it just kind of brought me to her and closer to her, and wanting to really have this in-depth, as in-depth as it can be, conversation with her and have her insights be spread to all of you. But another aspect of that is that she wrote this wonderful post on my birthday, and which is posted on my blog, firstgenrise.com, and really talking about decisions. And that's what the bulk of this conversation will be about, is decisions. You have to make a decision about, whether or not it's going to be an in-state or an out-of-state university. So it really was a timing kind of meet and greet between the both of us. So
absolutely. I think the stars really aligned. Absolutely. I agree with you.
So if you're Dr. Eve, did you want to add any other words to the listeners, or shall we proceed?
I will say this, depending on where you're coming from, be it that you are an educator trying to help students, or if you are looking to go to college, if you are a parent, I think this will really give you a good general feel of some of the decisions that you have to make. And hopefully you'll be able to, I guess, take away from this a nugget or two. That's our goal, to give you some nuggets and things to think about. Again, first-gen rides, all about first-generation college students and helping to prepare for school and after school and self-promotion. And so I think this is really some things that I don't know, I'm sure with you, just some things to think about that I wasn't necessarily privy to when I thought about going to school. We can talk about that. But that's really all I have. I look forward to digging in.
All right, let's move on to the next slide. So now, what is it that we'll be speaking of today? We have about 45 minutes left. There's a lot that can be shared within this 40 minutes. But the question that is definitely going to really be behind this webinar is, what is the experience of a first-generation college student? And that is many times not really shared or expressed, but many people are starting to really come around and realize there's a unique experience, a unique journey that comes with being a first-generation college student. And so the four discussion topics are going to be, you have your general overview, the pros and cons in general of going to an in-state and out-of-state university or college, the living arrangements, which were all very new for me, employment, which is key. You go to college for a purpose, either to get a stepping stone for an advanced degree or seeking employment. And so that's definitely important when thinking about which university, making the decision, as I said, Dr. Eve's post, making a decision to matriculate into a certain college, whether in-state or out-of-state. And then what's definitely going to be a driving force when making the decision where to go to college is maintaining relationships. But many times first-generation college students, do have a certain community that they have, from their family or their friends or their own location. So that may be a factor that is mostly neglected or not discussed. So that is something that is definitely going to be discussed here and is important in your decision-making process. Dr. Eve?
Absolutely. I agree with you.
Wonderful. So let's begin. So as the slide says, this is me, Ernande. I see myself, or in my moments in this work that I do with the blog, is being a redefinition strategist. I proudly wear the badge of being a first-generation professional because I am the first person in my family to become a lawyer, and it's a proud moment in my family, and I'm happy to answer all the questions that my family asks. So I'm working on redefining what it means to be a first generation and make everyone extremely enthused about being that person and letting them know that there's wonders and more to come with this, because everyone likes someone that is has a different story and is looking for help and wants to be a part of that journey to get them to stardom, whatever stardom is. And so for me, when I was growing up, I came from a very great family that really was proud to be in the country and proud to be a part of our culture. And so not many people who are first gens and brought into America have that same journey and same outlook. So just redefining what it is to have come from a different culture and trying to weave it into your own life path to your, whatever your end goal may be. So I work on the blog to really strategize what you should be doing, how you should be doing it, and really using the essentials of what you are and what you embody as a way to reach to the top. And so for my background, as I stated, first-generation law school student. I went to College of Notre Dame in Maryland, which is where I reside, and my master's program was in Georgetown. It's not in Maryland, but it's not far from Maryland, so I still feel that's in the state because I resided home during that time. I didn't move to D.C. I stayed close to home, and I did go to law school in Hofstra, New York, at Hofstra in New York, so that was 4 hours away, a still good bit of a time away from home. And in my current professional capacity, I sit on a few committees regarding legal education and admission to the profession, as well as a first impressions committee for students at my college that are just first gen and looking to figure out how to navigate through freshman year. And now for the fabulous Dr. Eve.
Oh, thank you. And I didn't realize, until recently, how much you love the North because New York is really cold. But I hope that you loved it up there. And I did the opposite. I went south. So I am Dr. Eve, and I am a native of Charlotte, North Carolina. So I guess it kind of gives you some context. I am an inspirational speaker and a life design consultant. And so I'm all about encouraging and inspiring people to live their best life, to be their best self. But I do so through specific topics, which include higher education, purposeful living, and leadership. So I'm really intentional about how I help people to define what it means to live well. And, of course, as Ornande talked about, I kind of stalked her, too, and being able to see what she did with First Gen Rise, being a first-generation college student myself, I definitely wanted to connect with those who shared a similar mission and passion. And so I like that the relationship evolved so naturally and that we've been able to come to this. I used to work in higher education. I actually did so for about a decade, and I loved every bit of it. And so more recently I transitioned to being a full-time entrepreneur, and I love the lifestyle. But I can't tell you that I ever saw myself being in this position. And I say that because being a first-generation college student, I didn't know how education was going to open up some doors for me. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, what I was doing, how I was doing it, or why I was doing it. I just knew that I'd figure it out. And so I ended up going to an HBCU for my undergraduate studies and a PWI for my graduate studies. So I think that I've had the best of both worlds. For me, nobody in my family had even thought about going to college, although I learned later in life that my mom actually had a couple of athletic scholarships to go to school, and she didn't have children, so I can't tell you why she never went. She just didn't go. And my grandparents would push me to go to school, but this was like later in my senior year. And so I was a little behind, actually, in applying for colleges and universities. The idea of going to really big campuses really scared me, and I've always been one of those, I like a small community kind of thing, so I ended up going to actually a small private institution for my first school. And I really loved it because it's what I needed. So as I grew and got to know more about myself, I actually ended up going to a rather large, predominantly white institution in Mississippi. I'm a graduate of Shaw University and the University of Southern Mississippi, just to kind of make that clear. And I've only paid for 2 classes in all of my academic experiences, and a part of that was just making sacrifice, and sacrifice being that when I went to school out of state, I didn't know what I was going to do. To be honest with you, I was like, oh, my gosh, and I think you can probably understand, Ornande, that sometimes it's like, okay, I'm first gen. I have to work. I have to take care of myself. What am I going to do? And so all of that made everything complicated for me. And I say all of that being paying for school, being away from my home, learning how to live on my own, things that we're going to discuss today. So this is really a rich conversation, being able to help other students who are coming along to make better, more informed decisions as they choose to go for school, be it undergraduate, if they're even thinking about going to grad school. I've enjoyed my collegiate experience, both undergrad and grad, and if I could do it all over again with the knowledge that I have now, I can't imagine what I would have done. But, hey, everything happens for a reason, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And everything does happen for a reason. You know, we are we have the lives that we have so that we can enrich others and educate others. And it is certainly, you know, it's always, everything in retrospect is always, like, if I had known, I wish I had known, I would have done things differently. But you can definitely be a light to someone else, and that's what we're hoping to be right now, is a light to you so that you can learn from our lessons and really think about what you should really consider, because if this is an investment, college is an investment, and as Dr. E said, you know, when it's all done and over with, you should look at it and think, I really did consider a lot in the beginning, and I'm glad I did make those considerations, and it turned out better than I expected. If it doesn't, it's not the end of the world, but definitely having as much information in the beginning is always helpful to feel satisfied in the end. So the next slide says, what do you hope to get out of this webinar? You know, I've heard in just many conversations that people, you know, make a lot of decisions based on financial reasons of going to a certain school or just to get away from home because they're just tired. I know I live in a very Caribbean household, and it's definitely a challenge sometimes. So when I was thinking about going to school, I definitely applied to many of the farther schools just so that I could get away from my Caribbean father. So, but who's very loving, who took care of me, and who had the best to offer in my household. But, you know, just wanted to really be very much more independent right out of college. But really to you, we hope that you can, when you're looking at your applications, looking at your acceptance letters, that you think about, oh, this package looks great, but does it encompass all of these other things that are important to me as a first gen, because no one else can really give me that information. And so now that I have this information, let me compare notes, you know, compare and see what works and what doesn't work. And if not, we can also look to figure out how we can prolong the conversation. It doesn't end here. You are definitely welcome to participate or, you know, contact us and see what we missed out and what maybe are some gaps in your understanding or in our perspectives, and we're happy to fill it in.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah, and I think you touched everything that I would have said. Yeah, definitely. Let's get into it.
All right. So the first slide for the substance portion of this is general pros and cons. And so we, you know, have it broken down into two columns of pros and cons. And we won't really read from the slides, but we're just going to give you information that is on there. And so the first one is, so let's start with the left column, pros. And pros says in-state, and the best thing about being in a university or college in-state is just the cost. You know, when you're a student that goes to school in the state, it's a less tuition amount, less fees, just because you get a little credit, you know, a little credit for that. And that's wonderful because, you know, it limits or reduces your expenses. And the other thing about that is the scholarships and the grants that comes with it. You know, I work for a state senator, and we offer senatorial grants to only students that live in the state. You know, we don't give any scholarships to outside students. So we always get calls about that, but you know, that's just how the law is written. We're not allowed to grant any out-of-state students a scholarship. And the scholarships can be pretty hefty. We have a long range. I know when I was in school, I got a $1,200 scholarship from our state senator, and that was helpful every year because the scholarships are yearly. And there's other benefits to living at home, being able to come home if you need it, if there's an emergency, or someone to come to you if you have an emergency. And so that's just the positive of having of going to school in the state. Dr. E, do you want to talk about the out-of-state pros of going to a university not far from home?
Oh, yeah, out-of-state, and I'd even say this just to kind of preview, there's a lot more to consider going out-of-state because the dynamic just changes so much. But something I really like about the out-of-state experience is the variety, how it allows you to expand personally, professionally, intellectually. I know that there are some institutions in different areas that offer, let's say if you are a business major, there are some institutions that are rated the top business programs in the nation. So if you're really serious about your business, then going out of state is a great option for you to be in that environment that will definitely groom you to that. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but, you went a little bit further north, and I continue to go south. I love warm weather. So having that experience, I didn't really think about it at first, and it's like warm weather. Why does weather matter? Weather makes you comfortable. To be honest with you, weather can determine moods and how you feel and what you can do. Like going to the beach in Florida is not, an option year-round, whereas going to the beach in New York is maybe not the same, So you have to think about yourself in terms of what you want to do, how you can see your social life, even outside of school. And we talk about cost, and you'll probably even see that cost is considered both out-of-state and in-state. And the reason is because it could be a benefit to go to a private institution if you go out of state. People who've gone to Notre Dame versus people coming from California who go to Duke, they don't really have to worry about really it being more expensive. So that's an option that they can just kind of take off the table and just look at it for, okay, how am I going to cover my expenses? And what I really, really love about being out of state, something I really, really, really loved about being in Mississippi is meeting people from all over the place. A lot of times people tend to gravitate toward colleges and universities that are close to home. That's research-based information. So what ends up happening is if you go to a different institution, you're really likely to be immersed in a different network and meet people from different areas. So I can say that going to school out of state helped me to build a network between Alabama, Florida, Texas, Georgia, New Mexico, because of where people had come from. And I thought that was really cool. Whereas in North Carolina, in-state, it was a little bit different. So just something to consider for out of state. I think all of those things are really fun because if you like variety, thinking about going out of state may give you the variety that you need.
Exactly, and I do agree that going out of state for law school, where I went to New York, is considered the melting pot. So I met a variety of people that I thought I engaged with by living in the DMV, D.C., Maryland, Virginia area, but not to any vastness as I did in New York, because there's so many people that just come from all over to visit the big city. Although I was in Long Island, but when you would visit down, go to the city and have your weekends there or have your internships there, you definitely were able to meet so many different people. Everyone wants to go to New York or go to school in New York, so you're able to meet people from all over. People were from Michigan, people were from places I can't remember at the moment, but they were from all over. Now, moving on along the slide, the cons of going to a school in state is just the private schools. Private schools does not have a difference in state or out of state tuition. That cost is high for everyone. And I had the opportunity. It is an opportunity of going to schools that were private, and so there was no, discrimination in that area of cost, but it was still a decision I made, knowing, I don't think I really looked into it when I was a student. looking high school student, I just think, I just thought of it as this is a good school. I would like to go here. I'm going to go here, and that was about it. And so I would say, if you go to a school that's in state, and it depends what part of the state, you could have the same kind of environment, the same kind of people that are there because it might just be a good school. I know in Johns Hopkins we have different types of people that go to Johns Hopkins just because of the name recognition. But if you go down to a different school like Goucher, which is more of a state school but is still considered a private school, you have the same population of people that attend there, from the state compared to Johns Hopkins, which draws people from all over, which is still a private university. So, there's another branch to the in-state, with this type of scenery that you would see based on the school's reputation. So that's what I would add for that.
Yeah. And then in terms of out of state, it just higher cost. What it may cost to attend a public institution in your state versus going to the state over, like right next to you. So if I went to school in Virginia, I may be paying almost twice as much as a resident of Virginia to go to school. It's perks, for lack of better words, to going to a state school, and that's really because they're trying to build economy. So this is something to consider. Where's the economy that you want to work in? Where are the fields you want to work in? Because you're going to have to pay, to be there. If you get a scholarship, great. If not, then really have to reconsider what that would look like to go to a school. And cost, people don't really think about cost, but it costs a lot to travel. Like gas is out of control. And when I say that, if you are 3 or 4 hours away from home, what gas would cost, what it costs even your parents to take off of work to come and get you, like everything ends up being a cost. So it often ends up being more expensive to go to school out of state than it does to just go to school just where you are. But again, if that program is better, then you want to go. And I'd also think about dealing with homesickness. I dealt with homesickness quite a bit when I was in graduate school, and I was 10 hours from home. So just imagine I'm 10 hours from home. I love my family, and I'll even add this to you. My mother had gotten sick about 6 months after I had left, and she needed the support, but I wasn't really positioned to be there to help her. Although she encouraged me to continue to go to school, all of these things kind of made the process more difficult for me. And I say that because I just couldn't jump in the car and go home and be with my family. I was coming home maybe twice a year because I was so far away, and I was even in different time zones. So you can imagine even trying to call home, hey, y'all sleep, when it was still early for me. So just thinking about moving out of state, there's a lot there, even emotionally, that you deal with. But it can be very rewarding, if I had to say. But is there anything you want to add to that?
No, you seem to very much cover it. I agree wholeheartedly. I will say that I can't imagine being 10 hours away from home. I know my family is as close as you are to your family, and my brother would come visit me so that I could stop feeling homesick when I was in law school. And law school was very challenging just because I came from a science background to then go to a law background was just still a law, area or a legal area, and that was just very, very trying and required me to put in so much work and just understand. And so I would just get sad and lonely, and my brother would just visit me, and he wouldn't even do anything. He would sit and watch TV. So, but that was helpful for me to know that I was 4 hours away, so he could just ride on the bus and just get to me. And that was, so you have to think about, how much reliance or how accessible as Dr. Eve stated, will your family be in those times that you may need someone to comfort you just for 2 days, because he wouldn't come for long. They were just short visits that would boost me back up. It would be like an injection of hope. And then I
right.
was able to resume work again. And so I would echo all of what Dr. Eve said, because that is quite important when thinking about the mileage you'll have between you and your family when picking a school out of state.
And if you don't mind me adding to that just really quickly, you brought up a really great point. My family rarely came to see me. Like, I had people who never came to see me, and I ended up being in Mississippi for 7 years, although I was in grad school for about 4 of those 7 years. And that was really hurtful for me. It's not that they meant it, but I didn't understand, being a first-generation student, what it meant for my family to take off and travel, what it meant. Because I mentioned it earlier that it may not be economical. Some parents working, being paid by the hour, for them to leave is a day's worth of work, 2 days' worth of work, and maybe they don't have, like, a car that can get them to point A to point B. And what I mean by that, even, like, going out of town, so they have to rent a car, have to get the gas, have to get the hotel. I took that for granted, to be honest with you, but I didn't think about it when I was going to school. I'm like, hey, great opportunity, just go, they'll come. And when they didn't, I was like, man, this is hurtful. Nobody loves me. But it wasn't rejection. I just didn't have the full understanding that, unlike my friends who weren't first generation, and their parents would come in and, they would rent houses in the area or go to the beach and come back, I'm like, oh, you're more loved than I am. So if you think about going to school out of state, don't think that your parents or your grandparents or your cousins, your family, your friends, that they don't love you. They love you. They just may not be able to afford certain luxuries as in other people. So if you can do anything, don't compare yourself. Know that you're doing the right thing and keep pressing forward. I definitely tell you that much.
That's wonderful. And I, too, had those experiences when their parents would come. But, each family has their own capabilities and lack thereof. So,
absolutely, absolutely.
But, if you don't mind, Dr. Eve, I would like for you to continue on, and because you really do have that first-gen college experience. Well, just explain to me, just going off the sides, what was it like for you to be in state and living? What was your circumstances?
So I think this is a pretty interesting slide, not just because of the experience, but also my background in housing. And I've got to not only live it, but work it. So I bring some different dynamics, and I think I looked at it a little bit more professionally. For me, though, as a student, so I will speak from both sides. As a student living on campus, I lived on campus all 4 years. A part of that was that my scholarship covered my housing, so I thought, I'm not going to spend extra money to live off of campus. Not just that, I didn't have a car my first year and a half, so living off campus wasn't really an option for me. So I stayed on campus, and I liked that it enabled me to just be close to my classes, to be a part of my community. I thought that was great. But then on the downside is when my family actually could come visit, they couldn't come stay. So I know I've kind of hit pros and cons at the same time, but it's kind of an overlap, really. But I also love that I was able to get to the train station because I went to a school that's in a downtown area, so I could literally walk to the train station. So I was able to get home when things happen. As a matter of fact, again, a personal story, my grandfather passed away my freshman year, and my mom had drove up that day to come to school to get me. And although I didn't know that it happened, she didn't have to break that news to me over the phone, and then I had to travel home over the course of a couple of days and kind of carry that with me, as I ended up doing when I was in grad school. The also just saving money part. People think, oh, gosh, I'm going to stay in an apartment. I'm going to, be grown. Okay, that's fine, but you'll have those grown bills. And so really for parents, it could also be a money saver because when you live off of campus, you also have to consider that you have to buy groceries, that you have to get oil changes, that you have to get gas, that there may be something that happens in the apartment and you're going to be held liable for it. What if somebody doesn't pay rent? Then you're stuck with that rent as well, which then becomes a financial credit situation. So there are things that living on campus, especially in state, will allow you just kind of that room to grow up and give you space, but it won't overwhelm you. That's what I'd say. And I think I said a little bit both from both professional and a student perspective. Yeah. What about yourself?
That's a lot of information there because I didn't even know that you had that background in housing on the other side of it. I similar to you, I stayed on campus all 4 years as well, which allowed me to really not feel that like you said, I was in the north, so we did have some snowstorms, and so I was able to, yes, I was able to really, if I needed to get to class, I could get to class, and compared to everyone else had to find parking because they didn't move the snow in a way that allowed for the same kind of parking on campus. But the other benefit was that was like, my friends and I were able to get closer. We were able to experience, taking the trays from the kitchen and sliding down riverbanks, snowbanks. And so it was
fun.
Yes, so just the ability to have, exposure to different things. And so that was fun. And I can't really speak to the cost of it all because of the way my scholarship worked and the contribution from my family. But I will have to say when I did observe my friends who did live off campus, we did have a tendency to, have more of the study group meetings on campus compared to them living off campus. And so
right.
Being able to meet on campus and then just when they ran late, I was able just to go home rather than jumping in a car and having to drive into traffic or, keeping my eyes open on the road. So I will have to say that is a benefit of living on campus. But but it seemed like, for my school, they had like an on-campus group, an off-campus group that they formed, organizational group that they formed so that those people at least could be connected. And in a way, it kind of shifted us away from them, but they had their own programming, their own way of still being connected to the school. So I would consider that, how does that school, in-state or out-of-state, really develop a way for you to still be part of the school. And if there's options to live with family members, I know a few friends had family members that had homes in and around the area, and they were able to stay with them. So,
absolutely. And see, I guess you mentioned that, being able to stay with friends or family, because that's something that I think we take for granted, family in other states. It really helps to bond with them going out of state. So a great benefit, and I put it there, to just connect with extended family and friends, to see how they're living, to really grow with them. The flip side is, and a lot of people don't think about it, if you have children and you're going to college, you can go to college, but it may make things a bit more challenging. And I didn't really put it as a con for the in-state because, again, if you can live on campus and be home every weekend to help co-parent with, the child's mother or father, or to work with, your parents to help you in raising your child, that's an option. It's much harder to do that being out of state, and I've seen it with students who've come in and they're like, hey, I'm here and I've got my 18-month-old. What am I going to do? Because I have to stay off of campus and I also have to work. So it makes things a bit more complicated. And it's not impossible, but it's just something to think through. What kind of support system will you build for yourself? Because your living arrangement, it automatically, limits what you can and can't do. And then in some college-friendly apartment complexes like off-campus, they may not allow for children. So then you may have to be in a regular complex. And I can say this, when you're living off-campus and out of state, those college-friendly places are great deals for those who can afford it. and I say afforded, that have cars and want to live off campus and don't require much with eating and eating out. I'll say that much. But if you have children, you may have to stay in a single family apartment space that's not as college friendly, which may be an extra expense. And that's just, again, something to keep in your mind. And also the lack of personal space. I don't think people think about this a lot, but when you're out of state and you're living on campus, you don't have anywhere to go but on campus. You can go to a park, or you may go to a friend's house, as you make friends, but you never really have your personal space, unlike being able to go home to your parents' house once a month or to your grandma's house, every month or so, and go to your room and kind of be unbothered. You don't have that same space, and so you're constantly looking for that. I think a good way to say it is a getaway. So that changes things a little bit. Because I don't know, maybe you can speak to it, Ornandy, that when you're in school, you're still growing as a person, and you still have things that you need as an individual. I like quiet time a whole lot. And when I was in school out of state and I had roommates, I couldn't find the quiet time that I needed unless they were like sleep. And so that left me to being up to like 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. And over time, I had gotten so used to being up that late that those became my peak hours. So I'm a night owl. So living arrangements can really affect you on a personal, financial, physical, mental level. So those are really things to think about as you're planning for the next journey.
Wow, that is really good that you mentioned that. Just because I will have to say my out-of-state experience, the first year in law school law school's only 3 years. So the first year I lived on campus, and that immediately changed what I was going to do for the last 2 years of school. And it really, because it was a graduate dorm, it was not only law school students, so other graduate programs had different way of studying and the intensity in the study, right? So some programs you didn't need to study, day round, 24 hours, 7 days a week. They were just more projects, workshops, tutorials, who knows what else they had to offer in those programs. And in law school, it was quite intense. We had to read a lot of volumes to get through the night. And so, for the more to the lack of personal space and privacy, that was interesting because the refrigerator, I was just telling someone today that I love my snacks, and sometimes I have a tendency of not sharing my snacks. And so the common area was, I didn't have my name written on my Scooby snacks, but I didn't mean I wanted to share my Scooby snacks. And so you have to be much more considerate to do that. And if not, you just have to, keep them locked up somewhere else. And so you kind of get used to sometimes being asked if someone was polite enough. I had 3 roommates, 3 other people living with me when I first started law school, and then the last 2 years I only had 1 other roommate. And like Dr. Eve said, the reason I only had 1 other roommate was the other person, the girl and I were considering, got pregnant, and so we weren't having a baby in our living arrangement at all. And so that would have definitely changed myself being a morning person into a night owl like Dr. Eve here. But so you definitely have to consider just those things, the personal space and sharing the same bathroom. Because it's sometimes when it's in a different state. New York has very high rent, so I needed to definitely find a roommate. And so we wanted 3 people because it would just been much cheaper, and we were able to keep some of our money for other things that we needed in unexpected costs. But you never know what may happen. So just realizing that space is not going to be there is something that needs to be recognized immediately. Unless you live in
right. I think that's a great segue into maintaining relationships.
Exactly. And I will say that, the first people that I lived with in law school, only one of them and I, one of those 3 individuals and I maintained a relationship after law school. We we speak on occasion, and recently she went on a mission trip, so that relationship was maintained. But in regards to maintaining your relationships post-high school, with your family and your friends, the pro of that is in in-state institutions, you can do so because they're right nearby, and many students either still go to the same school that you decided to go to, or they go to a school nearby. In Maryland, there are a lot of colleges and universities that you can go to, but I knew, for me, all of my friends went out of state. I was probably one of 10 of us that decided to stay in state. So it was a different kind of feeling, but being in a Caribbean household, I had all my family members, so it really didn't feel like I was far away from home at all. And so that was great to have. I went home on bad days, and I would just be like, oh, my gosh, this science test was not so great, so I would go home, and my brother and I would just laugh. It's only two of us, so we would, really just console each other in those kinds of moments. And him being a male was always helpful because he was just like, well, I want to play a video game or something. So it was a great distraction many times. And did you want to add something, Dr. Eve, or did you want to move into out of state?
We can move into out of state, definitely. Just thinking about the challenge of maintaining relationships. I think that's the one I'd want to highlight the most. Being far away, and depending on, again, how far you go, I was in a completely different time zone. I mentioned it earlier. So being able to schedule that time to connect with people that you care about, but what do you do when they're working and they're an hour ahead, and like we just had daylight savings, and it's all the schedules are just kind of off, and then you're in school. Like graduate school was a very, like you said, a very demanding time of my life, and I wasn't always able to keep up with people. And when I did, I'll be honest, my best friend of 16 years, we fell out the second to last semester of my PhD program and did not talk for a year. But it's just because I did not have the time to invest. And doing the phone thing, the text thing, I just wasn't there. And it's not that I didn't care for her, but just to be very transparent, when you're in school out of the way, you create an entirely different life for yourself, really. And it's sometimes people don't understand because they want you to be the same person that you were. And for me, I was always available in state, but we could get together and do homework together, whereas now I'm working, I'm in grad school, and I'm in a different time zone. And when she needed something at a moment in life, I just couldn't be there. Well, whether that's being able to sit down or go out or her come over and just talk about it while I wrote a paper, it kind of removed that option. And so I say that, not that, everything was tragic, but I had a lot of tough experiences being out of state, especially as a first-generation college student, because she just couldn't jump on a plane and come down and hang out with me. And, we just had that time together. So thinking about how you're going to maintain your relationships is really important. And, again, the purpose of this is to be able to help you all learn from our lived experiences. We're cool. We made amends, but that was just tough. So what do you do, too, when your support network is at home and maybe you do fall out with them for whatever reason, a difference in opinion, and now you're really by yourself? How do you continue to go forward and still have to deal with the emotions and go to school and do work? And as a first-generation student, we already know that sometimes the support of being in school isn't the same when you don't have anybody else in your family who's gone. And so they can't speak to that experience to fully understand what you're going through. But, again, I always say be encouraged and keep going forward in that. That's my little small nugget.
No, that's not even small. That's huge. It's like you said, being a first generation to not have someone to just tell you and give you the support that most likely will be helpful for you to push through and keep going and strive forward. What you can really be reassured about is just having family and people that you know and familiar faces. So that's sometimes enough to get you through those moments. But when you don't have a system or some mechanism to keep that going while you're in school, it could alter, just different things in your life, which are expected of you as a student. And so
right.
that is amazing that you point that out. And so since time is definitely getting away from us here, I feel like you mentioned both sides of it, and they're interactive. Those two sides are very interactive. There's a plus for having being in state and out of state, which is being out of state, which is having a whole new pool of people to go visit during spring break and summer break, and then but being also the con of that also is, if you're out of state, another con, but not specifically related to what I just mentioned, but the other con is the trips back home can be costly. If you went to school in California, to come back home to North Carolina or something might be quite costly. Or if you went to a school, or if you have a school and you reside in Rhode Island and you decide I want to go to Miami or Florida, that's costly. So.
And it's more costly over the holidays.
Exactly, and that's when most of the time you'll be visiting. So it's right. There's good and bad to it all, but you have to make that list for yourself to figure out which is the good and bad you want to take in. So moving on to employment, which is essential. In one of my blogs, I see, when I was thinking about my interns, always asking the question. I had a student that went to community college, and he was looking into a four-year college, and he was trying to figure out, should he go to a university in Virginia or go to a university in Maryland. And, both had great programs, both had wonderful opportunities, but it also required how much effort he was going to put in to come back to the state or find employment within Maryland, which is he wanted to do. And so, the pros of going to an institution that is in the same state is tapping into that alumni network, or tapping into your own contacts, your family contacts, or anyone that you have that can help you within the state. And those systems are already built into that college that you attend when it's in state. But if it's out of state, like for me, when I went to law school in New York, I would come home for the summers and work in Maryland for the summers. And except for one summer, I did live in New York and work there. And that was helpful to still have those contacts for the summer, because that allowed me to connect when I, returned home. So, but it there again was the requirement to stay in touch, keep people informed what was going on, make sure that I had everything in play to be able to secure something when I returned home. So there's a great thing of being, in the state that you plan to work in when you graduate, or further your degree, but it's definitely important to know that you need to create a game plan in either direction that you go down. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, and I would say just really quickly, overall, just for the out of state piece, the lack of preparedness to work and go to school. If you struggle with time management and you need to work, it may be something to consider. That's a great way to practice, I guess that's what I'm saying. When you're out of state, because, again, being out of state adds on a totally different modge podge of challenges. But to be able to go to work, to school, to manage your classes, and to manage your life, your personal life in general, really consider how you do that. Because if you're late for class because you worked all night, but then as a first-generation college student, you have to support yourself, you can't just walk away from both of them. And then the option to walk away from school and just go to work, but then you're in a foreign place, could be very complicated. So, again, be prepared. If you can start practicing time management so that you can take care of yourself and all of your responsibilities. That's all I have for that.
Say that one more time, please. One more time. Just that
Say
line
again for
about
me?
time management. So essential.
Oh, yeah.
Just to repeat that slowly and just one more time.
You have to be prepared for your time if you want to keep your life in order. I think that's my nutshell for it. But if you weren't taught time management or how to manage yourself within time, it can be complicated. My mom didn't talk to me about managing time growing up. It's not her fault, but then going to school and, again, trying to work and trying to handle all of my studies was very difficult. I went to, like I said, a small private institution undergrad. It was an HBCU, so most of the individuals who were there were African American. We had international students come in, and I liked getting to know their stories. Everybody wasn't from Charlotte. People were from Virginia and New York and from Florida and from Alabama and Georgia. They were from all over the place. That was great. But then going to a predominantly white institution really helped me to build a community outside of my own race. And I say that to submerge myself in a very diverse culture. Being at a PWI helped me to also identify more about myself and my identity and how I even got to know what African Americans look like in Mississippi versus African Americans in North Carolina, how I could compare the two. But so going out of state and having that expression of self, I think, is really big as well, because it enables you to, what's the word for it, get to really know who you are. When I was out of state, I was like, man, I'm here and I'm by myself. I know what I know about me, but what do I really know about me when I'm not in the comfort of my own family and my own friends? What do I really like when I'm not, we're just doing this because I'm just going with them? Like, no, I really got to know some self-interest being away, but I also got to mesh with people who had similar interests and thus building my community. But Orlandi, I think you want to talk a little bit about the pros for in-state. Is that right? Yeah, I think so.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. I being in in-state was a great opportunity, like Dr. E said, to really be, remind myself who I was, because, if I brought a certain culture to the classroom, it allowed me to really either stand by what I was thinking, because there was other people that were there that didn't have the same culture, didn't have the same environment that I grew up in, but I was able to, see my family, see who I was, and really know that I can rely on that sense of community because it was still so nearby. So if I would just be, questioned or judged, I would just, be able to go back home and say, can you believe this happened today? And this is what I was, questioned about, and what do you think, and what are your thoughts? And so it's being able to have that, check, to say, wait a minute, am I right in doing this? And I was surrounded by the same people, so they also had the same thoughts as me. And so that was good, especially if they were good thoughts, good impressions, good perspectives. And sometimes they were challenged, so I needed that support to know that those thoughts that I thought about was important for me to hold on to. And so the pros of just going out of state, I did want to touch on that. I know you definitely mentioned that a lot about the diverse groups of people that you were able to come in contact with. New York was really, really unique, and I think that's an understatement sometimes. But, I didn't know, just the different kinds of cultures there were. I just really say that because everyone in my class was either from a Caribbean country or Israel or just all over the map. Compared to being in-state in Maryland, it was just a lot of people that were from the nearby cities and really connected to those cities, not really their culture. But in New York, they connected to a culture even though they were raised in that city. But the city that they were raised in was like, all of the Jamaicans were here, all the Jewish people were here, all of the Italians were here. So it was just like you were more connected to your culture than you were to the city. And so it was just an awakening of really realizing how prideful people were of who they were, and their family background than just I'm from Long Island, I'm from Queens, I'm from Bronx, I'm from whatever. No, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm, Guyanese or something. So it was just a newfound world when I was in Hofstra, and learning just the fact that many of the people that I was drawn to, even though they come from different backgrounds, also have the same kind of perspectives and life journeys or struggles. And so, you don't have to be connected by a zip code, but you can be connected by your culture and your background, and even a different background because you were raised similar to that person. My roommate in Hofstra was from Italy, and we're like the best of friends now, and we're still close, but she was first in her family, I was first in my family, and we were each other's support system, and we built this kind of first-gen community in Hofstra, which sparked why I wanted to do the blog. So was having such a strong connection in law school with this first-gen community and missing it in the first-gen professional world. And so I thought, let me recreate something that I really needed to get me through. And so I really strongly think that people shouldn't underestimate what a community does to you. And I was reading an article, which I think I featured on my Instagram and Twitter, how community and support is what really gets people at first-gen college students to get to the end point. We can recruit these first gens, but how can we get them to the last year of their education? And it shows that support is very essential in getting them to the graduation gate. And that community is very much important. And so that is what I would like to say on that point.
Tell us you had a great experience up there in New York. Like, I'm jealous. I won't say that Mississippi was bad. It definitely wasn't bad. I mean, it wasn't. I really loved my experience there. But even as you had your very diverse experience, I had one as well. But the flip side is the tradition in the areas. And I've learned that in some places it's not that much different. So, like, you can go to school out of state, but, like, say people from Louisiana and southern Mississippi and South Alabama had very, very similar cultures. And so while they were going to school in a different state, what they did in terms of tradition, like Mardi Gras and Carnival, Fat Tuesday, all of that at that southern part of the U.S. is very similar across the board. Like, people out of school down there for those holidays, and I used to be out of school, so that's why I would say I know.
Right, exactly, and those were great times. I was going to hit over to the last slide here. What one thing stood out to you most? Outside of the substance part of our presentation, of course, what one thing stood out to you most? I would have to say I'll pick one from in-state and out-of-state. So the one thing that stood out to me most in-state would be just the, to describe, I didn't describe my school in-state and college. It was a very small institution. There were not that many people in my graduating class, so I really knew who they were. And so what I would have to say about what stood out to me most is just my, ability to have leadership roles and to really to be embraced in just everything that was afforded to us in that school. So it was just learning the school's community, learning what they offered to us, learning, how I could just really build my own personality by reinforcing what the school was offering to me. And so just really identifying the strengths of my school was what stood out to me and what I learned. And now for law school, being out of state, it did kind of kick into survival mode most of law school. Just, I need to survive through this year. I need to survive through this year. So it was really just really learning how to survive, just because, as we said, there was no sense of having the family present. And so what stood out to me is really learning how to really be my own champion. And so I had to really think about my living arrangements. How could I be my own champion by finding out what living conditions I can have, what was needed, what was necessary, and then also thinking about, if there was going to be employment, how can I be the champion of guaranteeing that I have employment after graduation. And so that was what I remember most, is really trying to make sure that I came out on top in all of that, since there was a bigger, reward in the end of being a first-generation lawyer. So.
That's good. Now I'm over here thinking, what stood out to me, man? Gosh, that was real good, Andy. Gosh, that was good. What stood out to me the most? Because I like how you said champion for yourself. That's powerful. I know I'm having a moment, but I'm like, man, maybe I think the same thing happened for grad school for me, but it wasn't until the end. And it wasn't until I got past some insecurities of being an imposter, because I was a first-generation student. So even getting to the point of working on a doctorate, when you come from a background where you're not used to people necessarily going as far or thriving in education as you may have, you don't always feel the same level of adequacy. And so I had to step up toward the end of my doctoral work, and I had to be my own champion, especially, working on a thesis, and it's like, yeah, this is your moment. And what do you do with it? I learned mine a little bit later, but I'm glad that I did ever. So I think in terms of being resilient, I really learned that through graduate school as well, and being 10 hours away from my family when it was just me. I had no family or friends when I moved to Mississippi. I just took the jump and was like, hey, I'm going to make the most out of this. And I did. And I'm grateful that I did, because I really got to know so much about myself and my beliefs and my values being in that area. And as being a graduate, undergraduate student, I think the thing that stood out the most is being able to be a leader in spite of circumstance, because I came from a background where my mom was a single parent, raising 3 children by herself, sometimes working 2 or 3 jobs. And my first year of college, some very heavy-hitting financial things came about in my family, and I had to step up, but that didn't keep me from being a leader at school and in my personal life, where I started to learn how to be the adult that I always knew I could be, and I didn't let the hardship keep me from thriving. And gosh, I just think about it, such an emotional time, because undergrad was hard for me in a lot of personal ways. But then the academic environment, the people all around, I had great friends. I met a lot of great people who are still friends to this day. Like, they're my closest friends, actually. So, I don't know, it's being open to the world and finally realizing that there was life for me beyond where I'd come from. And that undergraduate experience really set me forward. If I had not gone to undergrad, I would not be where I am today. I would have never gone to graduate school. I don't even know if I would even have any education, to be honest. I had mentors to tell me, spread your wings and fly, girl, spread your wings and fly. So when you finish school here, apply all over the world and see where you land. And wherever you land on your feet and keep going. I think that was some of the best advice I'd ever gotten. And to this day, I keep that with me. So school has ultimately been the most life-altering thing that has happened for me. And like you said earlier, now I'm hoping to be a light for others.
So inspiring. No wonder you are an inspirational speaker. So you definitely inspired me. But that's wonderful. I really, really enjoyed you sharing that, because, unforeseen circumstances really can draw people closer together or draw them farther apart. But I'm happy you were able to really have these long-standing relationships with your friends that you made while you were in school. So what I will say, is if you have any, moving on to the questions portion, we are out of time. We did go a little over. If you do have any questions for us, definitely feel free to email us or contact us in many of the social media ways that we have, which is listed on this last slide here. We are eternally grateful for you, and we're happy to be with you and help you through it all in any part of your journey that you need assistance and advice on. As you see here, social media handles for me is First Gen Rise all the way through, and my email is firstgenrise@gmail.com, and my website right there on the slide as well. I'm happy to assist you in any way I can, and if not, I will connect you to wonderful people that I meet along the way, such as Dr. Eve, because she is bringing about change, designing people's lives in the way that they should be lived, and it's amazing. And so, Dr. Eve, any last words?
I am grateful for this opportunity. Thank you for it. I've enjoyed it. I hope that you all who chimed in have had an amazing time. I know we've went over with time, but I think this has been a great conversation. So much to share, and never enough time to share when you're imparting wisdom. But thank you to those of you who've been here today. Go forth and be great in whatever you do, and just know that we are living proof that if you put your mind to something, you can and will achieve it. And we're Black women, so I think that says a whole lot. You have a doctor and a lawyer on the line, and we are first generation, so go forward.
All right. Farewell. Hope to chat with y'all soon. Bye.